Welcome back to another episode of Please Call Me Crazy, brought to you by Free People Radio and powered by our favorite sponsor, TireGet.com. That's TireGet.com. You have to buy tires from somebody, you might as well buy them from us and help fund the movement, help support the movement. We believe in the freedom of movement, and that's exactly what the establishment wants to take from you now. I'm your host, Royce White, here in the belly of the beast, Minneapolis, Minnesota. This is episode 183. We've crossed over 1 million downloads. We've crossed over 1 million views on YouTube. I still get the sense that we're being suppressed on YouTube by the feedback we get from people who say they are not notified, even though being subscribed to the channel. That doesn't shock us. We've had a number of episodes on YouTube pulled down. This was early on. I think episode 18 was censored when we first started the channel. So who knows what the whole algorithm is doing on YouTube? I would venture to guess that the establishment, the technocratic establishment, would be against and censor someone like me. Um, However, I mean, we're still building, we're still growing, and we appreciate all of you in the audience, and we hope that the conversation continues to stimulate critical thought about issues in this most dire time of our nation's history and the history of human civilization. You can get the podcast on all major audio platforms: Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google Play, and iHeartRadio. I do know that Google Play, I believe Google Play is the Google Podcast platform is being merged with YouTube Music. I'm not sure how that all shakes out for those of you who listen on Google Play or the Google Podcast platform. You have to find out what's going to take place there. That has nothing to do with us, and we I'm sure we'll get some type of notification as to how that all transitions. Shout out to the War Room, great War Room posse, all of you in the War Room audience. Uh, I know firsthand from being at these different Republican Party Senate district conventions that are now starting to take place ahead of a primary that we'll have here in August for Minnesota. Um, People watch War Room. People are watching War Room every single day. They're listening to Steve, and they understand. They understand the platform. They understand our position. They understand the ideas, and they understand the direction that we want to take this country. So that's a very significant um, source of optimism for me these days. That more and more, as I spend time in the Republican Party, the War Room is having that osmosis effect of America First and ultra MAGA politics. Um, Maureen Bannon, Grace Chong, appreciate you, and then everything you do to help the War Room uh, do its very important work. Um, Thank you to Real America's Voice. I hope you guys are enjoying the Saturday morning show, the Royce White Show on Real America's Voice at 9 a.m. Eastern. We get to lead in for the War Room, which is a great honor. It's a great privilege. Steve is going to go down as one of the most important people in American history, maybe in world history, probably in world history. And it's a true honor to be able to lead in on Saturday mornings for such an important figure. Um, the John Fredericks Radio Network. If you're not familiar with the John Fredericks Radio Network, you can download the app and you can listen to my nightly radio show that airs on the John Fredericks Radio Network, but in its respective locations at 9 p.m. Eastern. And we love the radio show. The radio show is great. I'm having a blast doing it. We hope you all enjoy it. And we're still working on getting the replays up. I think we got the first 30 done. I think we're up to episode 40 or something like that. So let me see, 5. We've been doing it for about 8 weeks now. I think we started right there in the first week in February, and we're now to April. So, yeah, we've been doing it about 8 weeks now. It's about 40 episodes, and we're going to get those replays up on the Royce White YouTube channel. And look, I got so much stuff going on between the campaign, the radio show, the TV show, the podcast, and, everything else. It's a bit of a whirlwind, but I promise you we're doing everything we can to make sure that the content gets to where everybody can access it easily. And we want you to share it. We hope that you share it. We see a lot of people sharing it. It was funny. I had somebody send me a video from TikTok, which I don't really use. After I posted a video of my Free the Uyghurs soundbite after the Big Three game back in 2021, I think it was. And my TikTok saw a very significant uh, throttle in terms of traffic and whatnot. So I mean that's to be expected. We know who TikTok is, and we know who's running the show, and at least in my opinion, that's not a real mystery. But TikTok didn't really seem to be generating much traffic anymore, so I really kind of didn't pay much attention to it. And I had somebody send me a clip that was posted on TikTok from the podcast, and it was viral. And I enjoyed the clip that the person chose. I thought it was well done, well put together. The music behind it was great, and the content was relevant as it's ever been. Which is why if you watch the show, I'll go and talk about the same thing over and over and over and over and over. Little Rosie Perez right there. That's a White Man Can't Jump reference. It's a great movie, by the way. I watched it a couple weeks back. It's a basketball guy. White Men Can't Jump is one of those iconic and great basketball movies. Uh, really cool story about a black and a white guy sort of coming together and from two different parts of the of the community, let's say two different worlds and coming together through basketball and finding a common ground and becoming great friends and helping each other through other life struggles outside of the game. White Men Can't Jump is a great movie. There's some good nuggets in there about life. But anyway, I'll talk about things over and over because the establishment does the same thing. I mean, they're just gonna pound you with the narrative until you submit. The information war from the establishment is really a war of attrition, and it's not so much about the details or the nuance. It's to flood you with so much bullshit that it's hard to overcome. It's hard to even muster up the courage or the energy, the sheer energy to be able to fight it off and fight through it and try and make your way to a place where you can even start to see things as they really are and then apply the truth to your everyday life. These are very difficult times. And mostly I see people just trying to survive. And that's part of the true mechanism of serfdom. It's not just the economic the economic um, gap. It's not just the economic you know scam. It's what it is. It's the worry work is what it is. It's the worried worker syndrome. And we have a sort of worried worker syndrome across our society. Now, I'm not saying that people shouldn't work. I'm not saying that work isn't good for you. I'm not saying that some worry isn't healthy. Obviously, if you didn't have some sense of worry or anxiety or fear, you wouldn't survive very long. But we have created a culture and a society where the worry worker rules the day. And they rule the day, especially here in America, because we, the people, are supposed to have the power over the institutions that govern over us. And often we fail to check those authorities, but mostly we fail to even really critically think about them. And that's part of as much as I believe that the podcast is probably being throttled, I also get the sense that the zeitgeist itself, zeitgeist, a German word for the spirit of the times, the thinking of the times, the zeitgeist itself predisposes us to want to shy away from conversation that's a little too complex. It's a little too nuanced. It's a little too critical in the way that it thinks. It's a little too demanding of us as individual citizens and individual people. I really get that sense, and I remember having that thought when I was on Fearless with Jason Whitlock. And I would look at the comments and I would think to myself, well, some of these comments, some of these people in the comments may be bots. Some of them may be fake. Uh, some of them may be trolls. But all in all, um, I saw enough to realize there is a huge cohort of people out there that don't want anything to do with the critical thought necessary to really restore this republic. I mean, it's almost like it's too difficult. It's too hard. Oh, it's not that deep. I used to see that comment all the time. Often came from black people who were commenting on the videos when I was on Fearless. It's not that deep. Oh, it's not that complex. Oh, it's that complex and much more complex. I mean, we're living in I mean, it doesn't get much more complex than artificial intelligence, AI. It doesn't get much more complex than Niagara Falls issuing a state of emergency for a solar eclipse, and NASA saying that they're going to do some type of test where they launch rockets during the solar eclipse, and that the CERN particle reactor is going to be turned on during the solar eclipse. I mean, it doesn't get much more complex than that. I mean, even if all of that is just propaganda. I mean, let's just say you're in the cohort of people in this country that thinks much of what is being disseminated about space and NASA and astrophysics and particle science and things. Let's say you think all of it is just a bunch of bullshit. Okay, it's a sophisticated narrative. It's a very sophisticated narrative, and there are people high up in your government that preside over you that believe in that narrative, whether it's true or not. There are enough people that believe in that narrative that they are able to dominate the mainstream narrative for we the people. And there are a lot of people within the we the people who believe what they're told. They believe in the science. Even though science doesn't seem to believe in them, they believe in the science, trust the science. I don't trust science. And that's what I want to talk about today. I mean, I guess this whole story, which is, the buried lead about the CERN reactor being turned on again for the first time in 2 years, which I think is significant. And if you don't know what the CERN particle reactor is, it was an experiment to uh, crash atoms. It's a particle reactor. Essentially, the idea is, and I'm no astrophysicist or anything like that, but from what they say, what they say, the point of the project experiment was to try and clash atoms to recreate the Big Bang or to simulate the creation of the Big Bang, which can then give us insight into the universe. And I think it's more negligence. I think it's on par with gain of function, if not even greater, because I mean the Big Bang was a violent, by what they say, was a violent moment in the universe's history, and one that seems well beyond the control of man, who can barely make sure that the Boeing jets are flying properly and have the right safety protocols. It's hard for me to imagine that we have the right safety protocols around bio labs or particle reactors. That's just my first pass. I don't know. Maybe I'm not thinking right. But on first pass, it would seem that we are a bit too naive and negligent to deal with the knowledge that we've acquired. We don't yet have the wisdom to properly deal with it. And we're going to talk about that. But my point is, um, I don't trust the science. I don't trust the science one bit. I don't trust in science. I'm sorry. I mean, maybe that makes me a conspiracy theorist, or it makes me archaic, or it makes me a caveman or a hillbilly. I'm just a good old Minnesota boy from Lake Country, and I believe in things like God, family, and country, but I also believe in simple life. Rugged individualism. I mean, a man should have everything he needs on his tool belt, and we've gotten pretty far away from that. But I don't trust in science. I mean, I look at gain of function, what happened with gain of function, and I think to myself, how did a bunch of people convince how did a bunch of people convince each other that in order to prevent uh, a plague, we should we should enhance viruses that already exist to better understand how to combat viruses that have not yet come to pass. And in doing so, we're going to expose people people, the entire population, animals, whatever it is, we're going to expose the population to potential outbreaks and leaks of these viruses. And then we get a guy like Dr. Fauci to stand up at the podium and tell us that the risk is worth the reward. The risk is worth the reward, or the other way around. The reward is worth the risk. Science, and I've said this before, and I think it's hard for people to comprehend because so much of our lives deal with the wonder, the efficiency, and the great achievements of science. I mean, even this here, even me being able to talk to you and premiering the episode live on YouTube at a specific time, and all of you can watch it from all around the world. That is an incredible feat. And we don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but we need to take a serious look at what's most important to us now. You know, the YouTubes of the world are, although have become very authoritarian and technocratic and censored, you know, in the way that they operate, in my opinion, they're not the problem. I mean, YouTube's not the problem. It's a problem. There are problems with it, but it's not the problem. I mean, we got much, much bigger problems. I was at I said on Monday that I was at this Easter service, and Pastor Troy talked about considering complex ideas, and these are complex ideas, but they're not so complex. I mean, we have to ask ourselves a very fundamental question about knowledge, the acquisition of knowledge. Is knowledge without wisdom a net positive? And I just get the sense that we have convinced ourselves, we've convinced each other that knowledge without wisdom, knowledge regardless of wisdom, is a net positive. And it's just such a blatant heresy. I mean, when I talked about the four great heresies of the West, the scientific method, democracy, computer technology, and artificial intelligence, it just strikes me. It's so striking that the scientific method has become such a source of heresy. Not that science it has no good to it. Not that we shouldn't, do open heart surgery if we can save people. But our grace and our charity and our helpfulness as a species often crosses over into ambition and ego and pride and ultimately fear and sometimes even just downright wickedness and evil. And it does have an anti-human spirit to it. I say that again. And it sounds like I'm repeating what I said Monday, but I don't think there's anything more important than this. I mean, I honestly don't. I mean, we can talk about the LGBT. We can try and, we can try and refine the conversation down to these specific issues. And if we want to do that, I don't have to do an hour and 15-minute podcast. I can tell you the board of the debt, the forever wars. If we're going to talk about a strategy of right here, right now, what needs to change, what needs to be the priority, the board of the debt, the forever wars, end of discussion. Anybody who thinks they're going to separate out the forever wars from the board of the debt, they're lying. They're neocon boomers. They're probably trying to feed the military-industrial complex. And, of course, they're going to be pro-Ukraine. And, of course, if we go to nuclear war over the heartland, over Ukraine, necessary to maintain democracy, the environment, and some strange twist of geopolitical and esoteric jargon that a nuclear war is going to preserve the environment, the climate. Okay, we got a climate science globalist narrative propaganda, and these are the same people that are willing to instigate a nuclear war, make it make sense. And justice, equity, social justice, right? It's all for the people who have been oppressed. Everybody's oppressed. All of you are oppressed. I mean, the only people who aren't oppressed in this modern narrative, the only people who are not oppressed are white men, heterosexual white men, which is so odd. I mean, even if you just take that narrative, That narrative alone, the only people who aren't oppressed in this entire social justice narrative are heterosexual Christian white men. That's really what it boils down to. I mean, because see, even if you're a white woman, but you're liberal and you believe in the Democrat platform and you support the LGBTQ and Black Lives Matter and the Time's Up movement, if you're a white woman, you're not an oppressor. You know, as long as you're willing to talk about your sort of inherent privilege and sort of baked in white supremacy, you're not a part of the guilty system. You're not an oppressor. If you're a white man who cucks for this this cohort of people here, the white liberal women or whoever else, if you're willing to stand up there with the fist going and say that you're a part of this anti-oppression narrative, then your skin color no longer matters. You're okay. You're invited to the cookout. I can't tell you how many black women I see saying Joe Biden's invited to the cookout. I mean, Joe Biden, 1990 crime bill, Joe Biden, 1990 crime bill, Joe Biden, super predator, Hillary Clinton, they're all invited to the cookout because what? Because you need the federal government to expand to protect you from white supremacy. I mean, the whole thing disgusts me. It disgusts me at a profound level. The narrative is that white men are the only ones who aren't oppressed. Everybody else is oppressed. Everybody else everywhere in the world is oppressed. Black people are oppressed. The LGBTQ is oppressed. Women in general are oppressed. If you're an indigenous person of any part of the world that you live in, you're probably oppressed. And don't get me wrong, uh, the sun never sets on the British Empire, and the British colonial business model has done an incredible number on modern human civilization. The drugs piracy, the drugs piracy, slavery business model of the British Empire and the Crown is one for the record books for sure. Has really shaped modern society. However, I've said this before and I'll say it again, and I've said it in relation to this question about who runs the world. What's the new world order? The new world order is selling out. The new world order is to the to the highest bidder goes the spoils. To the most dishonest and most deceitful goes the spoils, and we've allowed it that way. We've even in some cases cheered and supported that. We've glorified it. I was watching a video this week of Skinny Joey Merlino, is the alleged mob boss of the Philadelphia crime family right now, currently, and he did an hour long video with VladTV. It's very influential podcast interview platform, one that would never have me on because I talk too straight. In fact, I went after Vlad one time on the internet on Twitter. I think you could probably look that up. I went after Vlad one time for his support of the Ukraine war. He tried to tell me I didn't know what I was talking about, and I told him, "You interview fucking rappers and mob bosses. Stick to your line of country, buddy. Leave the geopolitics to people who really take it serious." But anyway, um, I was watching this interview. I found this interview and I started watching it and I found it interesting because I always like to, how do I put this? The same way I say don't tell me what the race relations are like in this country on Fox News or CNN. Don't tell me what they're like when you get to a United Nations summit or one of these other international global sort of kumbayas. That's not what race relations are really like. Tell me what the race relations are like at the state penitentiary. At the state, go to San Quentin and you tell me what the race relations are like there on the yard at San Quentin. And it's the same thing for the legal system. Don't tell me what the legal system is like, on K Street, or what the legal system is like on Wall Street, or what the legal system is like, in this sort of vacuum of mainstream media, sort of thin veneer of jurisprudence. Don't tell me what the legal system is like there. I want to know how it is in the dirtiest, grimiest corners of the thing. And what you find out from listening to a guy like Skinny Joey Merlino, who made news for taking a picture with Donald Trump. Obviously, he supports Donald Trump. Is what it sounds like from his interview, and a lot of these guys do. A lot of these mob guys, these ex-mob guys, do for who are um, now coming out and talking and being more public. They tend to support Donald Trump. I don't know why. I don't know why. But on first pass, I'm not like, oh well, these guys are arch criminals, and the fact that they support Donald Trump says something about Donald Trump. What we have to understand, and this is what I've tried to stress to the boomers and the Republicans and the conservatives who may not understand that side of society, that part of the world. I come from a neighborhood that was riddled with crime, and a neighborhood where there was violence and chaos and drugs and whatnot. I was fortunate never to be somebody who got hooked on drugs because I never experimented with drugs. So there was really never an opportunity, although I saw it enough. So I find myself, I feel fortunate that I wasn't hooked on drugs because I know a lot of people who didn't have such luck. And I never was really involved in violence. I mean, a couple of fistfights here and there in the neighborhood, but nothing serious. And that being said, I still know the nature of how things work in the underbelly. And some of it, and I don't mean to call it the underbelly, because again, the corruption that happened on Wall Street in the 2009 and 2008 financial crisis and housing collapse, that is the underbelly. I mean, that is the true underbelly. And to even highlight the organized crime or the drug trafficking or human trafficking or drive-by shootings is kind of the Fox News way of getting your mind off of the idea that what's going on with your tax money in the military-industrial complex is actually the real crime. It's the highest crime, we could say. But anyway, I'm familiar with that, the underworld of this country. It's what they call street smarts. There's a difference between street smarts and book smarts. White collar crime, blue collar crime. There's a lesson in there somewhere. The white collar crime is not so white, but we'll save that for another time. That's another podcast. White collar versus blue collar. But anyway, what you learn from listening to these mob guys like Skinny Joey Merlino is he really starts to paint a picture of how the justice system works and how it doesn't work, and how the rules of justice are bent oftentimes in pursuit of an agenda or an outcome that a certain group of people within the government desire. And it has little to do with morality and ethics. And take, for example, Sammy the Bull Gravano. And he's not Skinny Joey's not the first one to use this analogy, but he is the latest one that I've seen. And he said it the same way I've heard other people say it. And I think that it's important to bring to you. And I think that this stuff is important for politics because, again, the way that the justice system moves in one place is not inconsequential to you. In fact, the two sort of merge plot when the stakes get high enough and your president is in the crosshairs of what appears to be a kangaroo court in a banana republic. Then those little instances of injustice or those little instances of bending the rules and playing fast and loose with the truth become much more serious, whether we like it or not. And so I'm always struck by the Sammy Gravano example where Sammy, in exchange for his testimony against John Gotti and other mob bosses of the organized crime world, was allowed to go free. And I mean, you're talking about a man who admitted to murdering 17 people. Admitted to murdering 17 people. And somehow he goes free in exchange for his testimony. And I guess the calculation is something like the 17 people that Sammy Gravano murdered, or the people that Sammy Grano could possibly murder as an individual, doesn't equal the amount of people that the full force and strength of the organized criminal enterprise that they're dealing a significant blow to. It won't equal the same body count. that all of these mob bosses and John Gotti continuing to be in power and to continuing to be able to function the way that they had been would yield more deaths and more bodies and more damage to the community than Sammy himself. But still, you have to ask yourself: Is it even right that the testimony of an individual like that who's so who, whose credibility is in question, is that even a proper mode of justice? It's sort of like the Donald Trump thing. I mean, it's E. Jean Carroll, but again, it goes back to Cohen, it's just we start to get to a place where we see an outcome and we want the outcome so bad, we're willing to throw out what's right, what's ethical. And this may seem like, what's scary about it is as a country, as we the people, we've all but conceded this. We're like, yeah, that's just how the justice system works. The justice system is broken. That's not an acceptable answer. I mean, nowhere in our founding documents does it say a broken justice system, a broken branch of government is an acceptable way to live, an acceptable form of citizenship, an acceptable form of governance. It's not acceptable. But our government's become so big and so powerful. How do we even fight it? How do we as individuals fight it? Hell, Donald Trump can barely fight it, and he's a wealthy man and very popular and has a huge following, and even he seems just subject to the whims of people who we can't see and who we can't name. It's kind of like what Muammar Gaddafi said about the people who adjudicated the trial there for Saddam Hussein. Is these judges who wear masks? I mean, we can't know the people who are overseeing and ruling on justice, and the people today who rule on justice don't necessarily wear masks, but they certainly are somewhat hard to see and very hard to hold accountable. And, the wheels of justice turn slow, and all of these different sayings that kind of create this complacency for what we see as nothing more than corruption. And again, I go back to the Sammy Grano example. It's like a man who killed 17 people has credible testimony because we want to go after John Gotti. That's not to say that John Gotti isn't, is justified or is vindicated or we consider him to be a good guy or right for whatever it is that he was involved with or may have done. The question is, at what point does a end justifies the means start to become a net negative? And there's a sort of science to this, right? I mean, that's kind of a social science. You got to realize justice, jurisprudence, the legal system is a sort of social science. And that social science has become just as pseudoscientific as our, more nuts and bolts science, right? Gain of function. We've started to play fast and loose with every corner of science. And really what you start to see is we're just playing fast and loose with the truth. We have no anchors. And look, when your government steals, everybody's stealing. When your government steals, everybody's stealing. Joey Merlino made another great point. He goes, I did 2 years, 3 years for placing bets for gambling. The whole country's gambling. The whole country's gambling. Everybody knows it. What's legal gambling and what's illegal gambling? I mean, really? I mean, think about that. What's legal gambling versus illegal gambling is going to be determined by who exactly? I don't know, the state gaming commission? Give me a break. Then you realize that your local slot machine has a better chain of custody and a better chain of custody, a better verification process than your average voting machine. So people go, well, what connection is that? What are you trying to say? Well, what I'm trying to say is gambling is highly regulated, highly overseen, highly penalized, and this priority of the criminal justice system. But your vote being secure is not. and you make headlines if you prosecute a Joey Merlino and you get some huge mafioso captain or boss to walk in, with the cuffs on, and we get to offer him up as a symbol of our work to fight crime. Meanwhile, Dominion can't even be questioned. And this is why they're afraid of people like me. This is why they will go out of their way to destroy people like me. This is why people like me and Steve Bannon will become the enemies of the state, let's say, because we understand. We understand how the common man, how the lay person has been flooded with misinformation, has been flooded with propaganda, has been flooded with a bunch of distraction to keep them focused, arguing, bickering about things that have very little consequence. Don't get me wrong, heroin dealing in the community has consequence. Crack cocaine has consequence. Illegal gambling and extortion and racketeering has consequence. But it's easy to make a Godfather movie and sort of create this, I don't know, romantic, propagandized thought about organized crime. And then your Boeings and your Raytheons and your Lockheed Martins and Northrop Grummons and all of these people go completely unnoticed. I think about it again in terms of, bridging a few gaps. As came across a few Eddie Bravo uh, podcast sound bites about flat Earth and space, and obviously some of it is meant to be satirical, and some of it's meant to be a bit of an exaggeration, right? I mean, uh, think Eddie's been pretty clear about that. But anyway, Eddie Bravo is a funny guy. I like Eddie Bravo. I think he's actually really funny, and I always appreciated that he, and Joe gave Alex Jones the platform that they did. I think their podcast is still one of the best of all time. It's like 3.5 hours of just truth bombs, right? And from there, I started to tune into Eddie every once in a while and just listen to some of the things he's saying. And I'm not a flat earther, and I'm not a space is fake kind of guy. That's just not my line of country. I don't even really think I've looked into it enough to have a real opinion, other than it would seem to me that the Earth being flat is stretch. That's just me personally. I don't know. I don't know, maybe because I've been playing with a basketball all my life, and I just love the idea that there is a sort of spatial intelligence about sports that gives you certain intuition about other things. I wish more athletes would use that sort of spatial genius and apply it towards other critical thought, because we'd probably get a lot of unique revelation out of that cohort of people. But anyway, I digress. I was watching Eddie talk about space being fake and flat Earth, and it was a clip that had Brian Callen in it, and I think Brian Callen's sort of making his way over. I mean, you're talking Brian was. If you know Brian Callen, if you watch the progression of some of these people online, Brian started way over here, on the left side of the aisle, and he's slowly making his way across that Rubicon to being America first. I would say, as is Joe and other people as well. It's going to happen. The time is ripe for people to see the truth of a lot of these things. But anyway, so I was watching this clip, and Brian Callen's there, and and Eddie Bravo's going off about space and about flat Earth and whatnot. And the first question Brian asked was, why would NASA lie? And I thought to myself as I was watching it, oh shit, and any flat earther or any space is fake person out there is going to love an opening question like that, because that's the perfect thread to pull on. So it's not really about whether or not the earth is flat, or about or if space is fake. That is the actual first question that we should ask. Why would NASA lie? Well, there's plenty of motive for NASA to lie. And you may be thinking to yourself, what does this have to do with the courts and the mafia and the common thread here is that your government is big as a motherfucker. It's huge. It goes all the way from your criminal justice divisions all the way to the NASA and black budgets. And I mean, the arrogance to think that a government is so good at compartmentalizing, and it's no wonder that people get lost in the system, that people get screwed over by the system. The system and its guilt is just as much about it being too big and by way of naturally negligent, um, in the way that it proceeds, in the way that in the way that it operates. How can a government this big even hope to function properly, much less with some coherence of morals and ethics? Why would NASA lie? Why wouldn't they lie? That's a better question. Why wouldn't NASA lie? You know, why wouldn't your government be lying to you? If your government has a $4 trillion inventory, or they should have a $4 trillion inventory for the Department of Defense, and they only come back with $2 trillion, $2 trillion worth of inventory, just gets up and walks out the back door. I mean, it reminds me of the scene in Goodfellas, right? When they take over the little watering hole there, and the little restaurant owner goes into business with Paulie Savino, the captain and that crew, and they start running insurance scams and inventory scams. You know, and coming in the front door and out the back door. You sell a box of booze that costs $200 at $100 because what does it matter? It's all profit. Nobody's going to check. I think of what the government is doing to the American people in the context of an ordinary street guy, of an ordinary common blue collar, working class American. The only difference is the scale at which these crimes are being done are so much bigger. It actually makes the American mafia seem laughable. Honestly, honestly, I mean, you could get listen, John Gotti in his heyday, in his prime, couldn't dream of touching $2 trillion a year. Okay, that's just my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong. You know, maybe I'm wrong. I could certainly be wrong. Honestly, I don't even I couldn't even venture to guess just how big the cash gets in organized crime at that scale. But I'm pretty comfortable saying it's not reaching $2 trillion a year. $2 trillion of inventory goes missing, and the American people can do what? I mean, the Congress is bought and paid for. The Senate is bought and paid for. The executive branch is captured by all measures. And we got a man in office who can barely remember his own name, let alone bring accountability to the agencies that could participate in a scam like this. We're being scammed. But hey, look over here. Look over here. Fox News, look over here at this 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 drug ring of 18 black guys who are moving marijuana or fentanyl or whatever it is in your neighborhood, in a theater near you. It's like, who do you think's running the theater? How do you think this stuff is even accomplished? I mean, there's so much more going on here than meets the eye. It's hard for me to sit back and watch and even play into it. And I know I start to wonder who's even watching this stuff? Who's even watching the local news anymore? I mean, how silly do you have to be to tune into MSNBC and believe it? I'm not saying some of the stuff they say isn't true or relevant, or that you can't. But I mean, it's almost a shadow game at a level that makes it ridiculous to watch. It's obnoxious, and it makes a person like Eddie Bravo seem more and more credible. I don't care what he thinks about flat Earth. He's starting from the right premise. The right premise is these people have lied before. They've lied so much it doesn't make sense to trust them. It doesn't make sense to trust Dr. Fauci. It doesn't make sense to trust the National Institute of Health. It doesn't make sense to trust, Davos, the World Economic Forum, the United Nations Security Council. I mean, it doesn't make sense to trust these people. And what seems to be more clear than almost anything else is that Donald Trump will become the scapegoat. And in my letter to LeBron James, you can go on Amazon right now and buy my book, Epistle to the King. it was an open letter I wrote to LeBron James. Ended up becoming a book because there was so much I felt the need to say. But the second chapter is the second chapter. I believe I forgot exactly what the second chapter is, but a subdivision of the second chapter is the art of the scapegoat. And in there, I talk about Adolf Hitler being a scapegoat in World War II. And he was a scapegoat. Not to say that he wasn't a bad person, not to say that he wasn't evil, not to say that he didn't do heinous things, but we can look back now and understand that Adolf Hitler became a scapegoat, a justification for world government, for globalism. And although Adolf Hitler isn't right or wasn't a good person, it doesn't mean that it's a rightful thing to use him to justify the corrupt form of government and world government and geopolitics that we have today. You know, that even that's a sort of a end justifies the means deal. So, oh, Adolf Hitler was such a bad person. We have to have a one world government. We have to start to undermine the individual sovereignty of nations and the nation states all around the world, or else how can we protect ourselves from such atrocities? Give me a break. I'm not that daft. I'm not that silly. But in the same way, Donald Trump is being used as a scapegoat. His personal flaws. It's all about his personal flaws, his personal character. He's a mean person. He's a mean person. He lies. You know, he has sex with porn stars or whatever. You know, I mean, it's just not, all of it's just immaterial. It's not even relevant. It's obnoxious. It's obnoxious. Has nothing to do with the ideas. The trade agreement is still bogus. It's still broken. The economy is still broken. Don't talk to me about the economy and point to the stock market. I don't care what Goldman and Sachs has to say. I really don't. I don't care what Jamie Dimon has to say about the markets. Fuck Jamie Dimon. While I say that, I respect that Jamie Dimon at least had the individual the individual sense of integrity and care for his own image, his own credibility to give pause to the mainstream media industrial complex and say, wait a second. All these people who support Donald Trump aren't crazy. Donald Trump was right about a few things. And if we get so far over here into La La Land that we're not willing to acknowledge anything true about what he says, we're destined to lose. We have to sprinkle a little bit of the truth in with the bullshit or it'll never work. That's what Jamie Dimon was really saying there in Davos. That's what he was really getting at is, hey, never forget the Sun Tzu sort of strategy. Never forget the art of manipulation. You got to sprinkle a little of the truth in with the bullshit or it'll never pass. Maybe he's 100% genuine. Maybe he's coming around. Hey, I'm not against that. Maybe Jamie Dimon's coming around. I doubt it, but maybe. I never preclude miracles. To do so is a heresy. I don't preclude miracles whatsoever. But I think he was just giving pause to a mainstream media that has got tilted over so far in one direction, they're not even willing to acknowledge what's right in front of all of us. And it's an insult to you. It really is. But I don't even care what the Jamie Dimons of the world think. I don't care about your credentials. We have a crisis of credentialization in this country. Oh, you went to Harvard and you went to Yale or West Point or you went to, Dartmouth or you went to Northwestern or I don't give a fuck. I don't care. That doesn't, your credentials, your degrees aren't a sign of intelligence. They're not a sign of integrity. They're certainly not a sign of wisdom. They're not a symbol of wisdom. Insight, novelty. People learn how to get told information and how to regurgitate it and take tests. That's a lot of what college is. And if you get to the level of PhD or master's program and dissertations and whatnot, again, you have somebody who oversees your graduate program. Who do you think that person is? That person's somebody who went through a graduate program and he had a person who oversaw his graduate program. And so on and so forth. And it's all predicated in geopolitical ideas that we can go back and identify, like the post-World War II democratic liberal order. And it has its tentacles all throughout. I mean, not to mention Marxism and communism, but those are even kind of a cover story in here. The post-World War II democratic liberal order, the military-industrial complex, the empire, and playing empire, and justifying the use of tax money to play empire all around the world at all times. That's the real juice here. I don't give a shit what the Jamie Dimons of the world have to say. I really don't. I really don't. Don't tell me that the overall health of the economy is based on the stock market, the Dow. The overall health of the economy, you can see in how many people are willing to kill, are willing to resort to the most wicked, evil, senseless inhumanity in order to get their next meal, or something even more superficial. That's the real sign of the health of our economy. And by that standard, our economy is in shambles. My good friend Maurice Thomas Jr., working a regular security job, gets shot and killed by a 19-year-old black man. 19-year-old kid. You're 19, you're a kid. Get shot and killed by a 19-year-old kid who's stealing from cars, looking for a couple bucks. I mean, how much? We live in a cashless society. I mean, think about it. You're rummaging through cars. We live in a cashless society. What are you looking for? iPhones? What do you even hope to get? You can only get a few. That's the sign of that's the health of our economy, Joe Biden. That's the health of our economy. It's not what some mealy mouth, silk stocking asshole has to say from Wall Street about markets and trends. When a man points a gun, a lethal weapon at another man and kills him over the chance, not even the certainty, the chance to find a couple of crumbs in the backseat of a car that he's breaking into, that's the overall sign of our economy. And you tell me what these mealy-mouthed people really have to say is the answer to that. Universal basic income? Well, in fact, they do say that. In fact, they do say that. In fact, they do say taking your gun rights will help. Hey, if we take your guns away, that wouldn't happen. I actually had somebody tell me that on Twitter. In the wake of one of my good childhood friends dying at the hands of a needless, senseless gun violence, their response is always, well, take the guns away. Guns are out of, the gun rights are a problem. Gun control is an issue. That's their answer. Their answer is to have more rules, more laws, to more regulation. You cannot regulate the soul. You cannot regulate the soul. The same thing goes for the abortion argument, and I'm gonna say it right here and right now. As a moral issue, it's very clear. It's cut and dry. But as a matter of law, it's not so cut and dry, because we can't make people love God. We can't make people submit to God through fiat. Christianity is a voluntary submission to God's love and grace and charity, a voluntary, participation in faith. Because you can't have real love, you can't have real submission and charity and grace and forgiveness. You can't have those things through fiat. You can't be forced to love people. You can't be forced to respect people. Now, the argument about abortion in the other direction is that to protect life, the actual protection of the life itself is the argument. But it's very difficult to make that argument when we've accepted death and debt as the foundation of our entire society, and we have. And so even that becomes a scapegoat. I'll say it. The moral issue and the ethical issue are cut and dry. Like I said before, cut and dry. Morally, it's a sin. Ethically, it's a life. We know that. But the contradiction is the problem. And they use the contradiction, but they don't use it in the way that they really should. They don't use it in the way that's most honest. They say, oh, well, you can't talk about a life being a life and then not take care of that life like the government. Again, their answer is always that the government should be bigger. The government should have more control. The government should have more power. We should give the government more money. We should give the government more of our freedom. We should give the government more of our rights. They always resort back to the exact same answer. And that's what we're fighting. And in that way, the Democrats and the Republicans are in many ways no different. They both want the same thing. They want the government to get bigger so that the money gets bigger. And the bigger the government gets, the bigger the money gets, the bigger the payroll, the people who work for the government. They say it all the time. Well, look how many people the government employs. Okay. So now the economy is the justification. If we have too many people who are unemployed all at once, I mean, the economy will break down. Okay, now the economy is the reason why we should give over our rights and our freedoms. I mean, it's laughable. It really is. It's a crisis of logic. And even more, it's just a crisis of principle. Again, even the abortion issue becomes a scapegoat. We care about life. And on this side, we got people saying, well, then take care of the lives at all times. And then on this side, we got people saying, well, it's not a responsibility. Well, hey, I don't even want to play that game. What I'll say is we have a death and debt culture. We have a death and debt society. We've accepted that. And before we can start to cast judgment on anybody, we have to first change our mentality, our acceptance individually, spiritually. We have to change our acceptance of a death and debt culture. Everything works through death and debt. Your iPhone, death and debt. YouTube, death and debt. Agriculture, death and debt. I mean, it's all death and debt. I mean, in that way, we wonder why we can't pull ourselves out of this rut as a nation, as a people, as a culture. We wonder where the decay is deep. You can't just get it. We need a root canal. In fact, we need an extraction. Just abolish the Fed. Rand, I like Rand Paul. He's one of the few people in the Senate that's willing to say it like it is. Stop with this audit the Fed shit. Abolish the Fed. Let's just cut the bullshit. The tooth is rotted out to the core. It's infecting the gum. It's infecting the jawbone. Okay, we need to pull that motherfucker straight out. Abolish the fucking Fed. Fuck the audits. Who's gonna audit? Who we gonna get to audit? Give me a break. Out. Right? I mean, and it's a lot of these administrative state institutions as well. So it's extraction time. We've let some decays and some rots get a little too deep, and now we got to extract. And that doesn't make Donald Trump's presidency on day one some type of absurd tyranny or fascism. It makes it a rightful response to what we've seen go on. And everybody who doesn't like that, everybody who doesn't want that or is afraid of that, all they're telling you is they don't want the status quo to change. They like the status quo. And what makes that so ugly is that these are the same people who you often find online complaining the most about the system and the status quo. And that's the real theater that's ruining this country, that we the people have invested in a sort of scapegoat, a sort of public-facing conversation about change. This is what makes Barack Obama the asshole that he is. It's not that he was ran by the deep state. It's not that he supported a globalist agenda, or that he undermined the sovereignty of this country, or that he undermined the Judeo-Christian tradition in this country. All of those things are a problem too, but that's not the worst. The worst is that he posed as an agent of change. He wasn't an agent of change. He's the slow and steady hands. The slow and steady hands are the people who you can rely on in a crisis to do the wrong thing to preserve the status quo. That's who Barack Obama was. And it's not just him, it's a lot of them. It was Bush. It was Bill. It was Bush's father. It was a lot of these guys. It's a lot of these guys. It's Karl Rove. Talk about a pair of steady hands. I've never seen a pair of more steady hands than Karl Rove. This is what we're up against, the steady hands. there in D.C., but the steady hands all across this country, at the tops of industries all around the world now. The steady hands, these people pose, these people talk about change. It's all theater. And because they have positions, because they have high positions in our society, high positions of status or wealth or celebrity, we have common citizens that look to them, put on this act in their little political theater, and they start to replicate it or they start to copycat in their own little life. And you have this little mockingbird effect of all these common citizens who look to a Barack Obama and go, I want to be an agent of change. But the change that they agent doesn't have a shot in hell of shifting the status quo. In fact, the act itself, the theater itself, is the most stabilizing force of the status quo. The political theater in this country is the most stabilizing force of the status quo. Half these people aren't even willing to mention the Federal Reserve, let alone say abolish it. Some people don't even know it exists. When I marched 15,000 people to the Federal Reserve after George Floyd died, I can't tell you how many people didn't even know what the building was. And it's sitting right there on Hennepin Avenue. It's sitting right there on the busiest intersection in the entire state of Minnesota, and people don't even know what the fuck the building is or what it does. That's hiding in plain sight. That's how the political theater starts to distract the common folks from the real scam. They're just printing money right there. And there's only 12 of them. It's not like every state has a Federal Reserve. There's only 12 of them in the whole country. One of them just happens to be here in Minneapolis. I mean, that sort of tells you there's something conspicuous even about the setup. I mean, why are there only 12? That's weird. That's strange. Even then I remember thinking, why Minneapolis? I mean, I get it. A lot of Fortune 500 companies, and it's a huge airport hub. Used to be for Northwestern, now Delta, because it's sort of in the middle of the country and so on and so. But, just the Fed is one of the most mysterious and most corrupt institutions. And I think I'm going to run the creature of Jekyll Island again tomorrow. If you're watching tonight, please tune in tomorrow night. I'm going to run the creature from Jekyll Island again. It's going to be the 5th time because I don't think there's a more important topic that you become familiar with than the Federal Reserve. I mean, it's just a great example. And again, I go back to my comments from this past Saturday's The Royce White Show and my radio show. Borderless society, borderless country. We don't want to have a border here in our country anymore. A lot of people think we don't need a border. I joke, I say, well, hell, if we don't need a border, let's just stop putting doors on buildings. Let's stop with windows. Let's stop with all barriers. All barriers should be defunct. Let's just do away with the barrier industry. We don't need doors. We don't need locks. What do we need locks for? But see, I mean, even when you get to that level, it's like, isn't this scam obvious? We don't need borders. We don't need barriers. We don't need doors. There are no boundaries. What they're trying to say is we're going to create a society without bounds, without boundaries. And you think that mentality, that a society without boundaries, a society without limits, a society without borders is limited to the coming and going of people in and out of nations? You think that's really what the battle about the border is all about? You really think that's the goal, that's the agenda of this borderless society? Is about which people can come and go from a nation? That's not what it's about. The deeper spiritual meaning is we're going to normalize a society and a culture without boundaries. We are going to take off the limits on man's unfettered ambitions. I said it before. Maybe it's too esoteric for you, Jason Whitlock. Maybe it's over your head. I don't know. Maybe we should talk more about fucking football. Borders are not just a political construct. Borders are not just a political mechanism. Borders have a much deeper spiritual meaning. Borders place limits on man's unfettered ambition. And when man has no limits on their unfettered ambition, they start to believe they can play God. And that's when you want to go live on Mars. You want to go live on the moon. You want to live in space habitats. You want to be, interstellar, intergalactic civilization. You're Michio Kaku. You want to, be able to particle beam me up, Scotty. I mean, you start to lose grip with what's even achievable. And don't get me wrong, I know that there are things that man never thought would be achievable, and somebody had to think outside the box to get us there. But is there going to be any type of limits? Is there going to be any wisdom that we that we use with the knowledge? Does the knowledge need wisdom, or is the knowledge just enough? Sometimes knowing shit gets you in a whole lot of trouble. In the streets, we used to, I don't want to know. I don't want to know. I don't want to know, you know, because sometimes knowing shit ends up getting you in trouble. I don't want to know. I don't even want to have. I don't even want to have been on the record having the conversation with you and they talk about in the streets and being on the record. I'm not talking about the official record like with a reporter or in a court of law. I mean on the record with people in the community. Talk about being on the record. I don't even want to talk about that. I don't want to be on the record talking about that with you. Don't tell me about it. I don't want to know. There's a lot of wisdom that comes from our blue collar working class communities. Sort of simple common sense that we need to get back to. Same as rural America. And that is kind of what Jamie Dimon was saying, that we treat these MAGA extremists now. They're calling them maggots. They're calling us maggots now, right? You got to dehumanize us because wanting a border is too extreme to be treated as a human anymore. Drugs, piracy, slavery. Got to dehumanize the people who think different in order to subjugate them, in order to be tyrannical over them, to govern over them, to rule them. And you could call us maggots. We're nothing worse than the under a rock sort of you know just disgusting sort of leeches on the dead carcass of society. I don't even know if there's anything more disgusting than a maggot. Wow. Calling people who believe in having a country and who believe in paying for the issues we have in this country first, America first, is we're the maggots. Not the people who use international politics and propaganda and a bunch of other media psyops to justify taking away your rights and your money. They're not maggots. I mean, they're not sucking off. They're not leeching off of the society at all. It's us, the simple people who want simple lives, who just don't want to be told by their government that we need a piece of paper to run a small business. A small farm who gets overrun by the Monsantos of the world, told to take a hike. Small business owner, who faces eminent domain from a big corporation who has much deeper pockets and much better attorneys. If this is the country that we've accepted, then we are definitely on track to reap what we've sown. But I think there's a movement in this country that sees how out of control it really is. The question is what we're willing to do, what we're willing to sacrifice, what we're willing to stand for, what we're willing to bear witness to. And right here today, I would like to bear witness. I would like to bear witness that knowledge without wisdom is not a net positive. that we have a crisis of science and we have a crisis of trust in science. We have to ask real questions now about where we go with technology, where we go with science, and where we go with the people who claim to be the experts. Don't tell me that the election was tampered with when Donald Trump won, but not when Joe Biden wins. I mean, how stupid do you think I am? It's been another episode of Please Call Me Crazy, brought to you by Free People Radio and powered by our favorite sponsor, TireGet.com. That's TireGet.com. You have to buy tires from somebody. You might as well buy them from us and help fund the movement, help support the movement. We believe in the freedom of movement, and that's exactly what the establishment wants to take from you now. I'm your host, Royce White, here in the Belly of the Beast, Minneapolis, Minnesota. This has been episode 183. We appreciate your viewership and listenership today and in the future. Make sure to tune in on the John Fredericks Radio Network for the Royce White Radio Show and Saturday mornings on Real America's Voice for the Royce White Show, 9 p.m. Eastern for the radio show, 9 a.m. Eastern on Saturday morning for the TV show, Real America's Voice. We appreciate you. And in closing, you hear me say we believe in the freedom of movement. And that's exactly what the establishment wants to take from you. I'm here to bear witness again that this entire immigration crisis isn't about changing the electorate. I mean, that might be low-hanging fruit. What it really is going to be in the future is a justification for martial law when they create so much chaos and so much violence, which can only happen eventually because there's a carrying capacity to how many people a country can feasibly govern and maintain some type of control on. And when we supersede that capacity and when the currency collapses or the price of bread gets too high, when you get that perfect storm of inflation, lack of opportunity, demoralization, depression, and an influx of immigrants and people who are undocumented that we can't really even dream to govern over, you're going to have chaos and violence, and then you're going to have martial law, and then you're going to be no different than the illegal immigrant. See, and that's the great scam. The illegal immigrant isn't about a separation of status of citizen versus non-citizen in the long run. In the long run, none of you are going to be citizens anyway because it's just going to be global government, and you're going to be just another piece of inventory. You're going to be another potential hostile. There's going to be government, and then there's going to be non-government. And the people who are part of the government are going to have the weapons, they're going to have the power, they're going to have the authority, they're going to have the technology, and the people who are non-government are going to be left out there to fend for themselves. And there's going to be no difference between you and some person who walked here from Guatemala. You think there's going to be a difference? You think they're going to care? Hell, they're already calling you maggots. You're lower than the Guatemalan immigrants. Unless the Guatemalan immigrants support Donald Trump, and then I guess that they're probably a special form of a special type of non-human. If you get to that level, it's like us black people, just like me. Us black people are oppressed. Black men are mistreated. We're the victim of a guilty system until you support Donald Trump, and then the hell with you. You're no better than the white supremacists. Thank you for being here this evening. We'll see you on Friday night for another great Hebrews episode. We haven't had the great Professor Penn on for 2 weeks, so I want to hear what he has to say about the things breaking out there in the Middle East and in with Belarus and NATO and some other news there from the world stage. So we appreciate your viewership and listenership again today and in the future. The fight continues. Don't die a jerk off, and as always, Godspeed.